Perfect. That's
All
good.
right, sounds good. Welcome to the Tree of Truth podcast with Lidstone and Lambeau. In this podcast, we search for common sense truth from a heightened human consciousness perspective. So we're simply trying to elevate our minds up above the confusion back down on planet Earth. Today, we'll examine the concept of censorship, which is happening rather prevalently back down on planet Earth. First, let's examine kind of the need for censorship. Why would we ever need such a thing as a human race? Second, let's examine the players or the human beings that are involved. And finally, let's try to search for like a common sense solution for this type of problem that plagues the planet. Okay, today we may have a guest. Okay, we're hoping to get a unique perspective regarding censorship from, she's a friend of mine I've known all my life. Her name is Amy. We call her the Desert Brat. She spent decades researching and defending the cause of American and global freedom. So she's very, very, very well researched on the topic and has an incredible perspective. So my name's Matt Lambeau, and I'm a human consciousness researcher and author. I shall represent the Western Hemisphere. With me is the lovable Lucinda Lidstone. She's a trained psychotherapist practicing for over 20 years, and she has her own very successful podcast called Talking Tea Leaves. Okay, and she will represent the Eastern Hemisphere. Together, we are your East-West connection in hopes of someday uniting the world around common sense truth, or what we like to call our Tree of Truth. You can find this podcast and everything else about Lucinda and Lambeau at treeoftruth.org. That's treeoftruth.org. With no further ado, I would love to welcome my lovable friend, Lucinda. How are you today, sweetie pie?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, couldn't be better. Couldn't be better. But no, I've got a weakness for Fridays.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, just if you rank the days of the week, you know
Yeah,
what I mean? I hate
yeah,
Mondays. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And Fridays, for some reason, it's just all right, man. I don't know. I'm glad it's Friday, whatever that
Oh,
means.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you get
I
some of
think
that?
yes, definitely. But I think it's imbued right deep down into our bones that Friday's the end of school week, isn't it? Or the end of working week for a lot of people. So Friday traditionally is a good day. It's a day for celebration.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And that's good because you're finding the little silver lining, even though it's
Yeah,
kind of a paradigm in your head. And when my
yeah.
kids get whisked off to school, I got a couple of boys that are senior in high school. I'm going, dudes, it's Friday. Let's go. That's good. Okay. So and quickly, so you said the weather's been rainy. We're having kind of a weather scenario across the planet. And I think this parlays a bit into our conversation because we're going to be
Hmm.
discussing censorship. And we've got some people that are pretty adamant that people who don't subscribe to the narrative regarding the planet, the environmentalist
Climate
narrative,
change. Yeah.
climate change, yeah, need to be censored. So, what's the weather like today for you?
Well, this morning, there was a little bit of sunshine, but all week it's just been raining and grey. Like every morning, it's a whiteout. I open my curtains and there's just white sky, which I think is quite artificial. It's not like grey
Mhm.
clouds; it's white.
Mm.
And then
Okay.
it's just been raining and raining and raining and raining and flooding the roads, etc. But today, this morning, there was lovely bit of blue sky, but now it's beginning to white over again. And
Okay.
so and so I don't know what's natural and what's been created, Is it the stuff they're spraying in the sky, changing our weather? I don't know, but we should be allowed to ask questions about it, shouldn't we?
Oh, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree
Yeah.
more. Yep. So on this side of the planet here, I'm up in Minnesota, and our winter has been unusually warm.
Yeah.
20 degrees above normal, and I'm loving it because I'm not a big fan of winter. So I'm one of those people that jokingly say, "Bring on the global warming, man. It's working out perfect for those of us in Minnesota." You
Yeah.
know, but good. And so you find a little refuge. What do you do to keep yourself warm there in your home?
Well, I've got an open fire, and we were just saying that I've got my little log burner here down in my studio, so it gets really, really snug. So as you said, that's the silver lining for having grey days. But we need the sunshine, don't we? You know, for so many things, but not only the fact that it lifts our spirits. And
Oh,
let's face it, there's not a lot. It's hard sometimes to find things to be joyful about. And I think when the sun shines, it just makes everything that little bit better, doesn't it?
it sure does. It sure does. And by
Yeah.
the way, you look really cozy right there. Super cozy. You're all cozied up. That's great. Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. The sunshine is essential. It's
Yeah.
essential. And obviously it's in a spiritual sense, it's the light peeking through the darkness.
Yes.
Yep, and
Yes,
we need it from
indeed.
time to time, without, long periods of rain and clouds and everything can dampen anybody's spirit.
Yeah. I did an interview with a guy called Ole Damagard. He makes it his mission to try to bring about peace on the planet. And what he said was really interesting, like the slightest pinprick of light will pierce the dark, but you need an awful lot of dark to obliterate the light. And I thought, yeah, that's really encouraging and so true, isn't it? It's
It
hard
is.
actually to block out all light.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think even literally it represents the creator and it just cannot be stopped.
Yes.
Yeah, it always
Yes.
overpowers the darkness, and that's a good thing
Yes.
because there's plenty of darkness.
There is.
Yes. And that's a perfect segue into censorship. So
Yeah.
yeah, I took a good look at the video that you sent me. Can you explain your perspective of that and why you thought that was important?
Well, for some time, people have been last year in 2023, we're talking about the online harms bill, the criminal justice bill. Um, and this has passed the man in the street by because on the surface, who would argue with it? It was promoted as trying to protect children online. So who would argue with that? We all want our children to be safe, and we know that they're open to so much stuff that they really shouldn't be looking at these days, particularly pornography. So on the surface, who wouldn't argue with that? But that has now become a law, and it's very, very scary because anybody that puts up misinformation, and misinformation, who's defining that term? But anybody who's considered to be promoting or sending or messaging misinformation can be subject to up to a year in prison. So if you think about that, potentially you and I just discussing the climate and saying, well, we don't necessarily think that this is man-made climate change, potentially I could be arrested and put in prison for up to a year for saying that or posting that on my social media. So it's actually very worrying. And even more sinister is that mainstream media are exempt from that law. So you and I and the man in the street aren't exempt from that law, but mainstream media is. So if that is not a clear point to propaganda, then I don't know what is really.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, and in watching the video again, the they talked in terms of, like you said, climate change. Okay. And
Yeah.
so what I see when they use the term climate change, it's like a voiceless victim for them. Okay. When the earth can't speak for itself. And so they feel like they need to come to its defense. Okay. And we talked about this a little earlier, that positions us to be immoral. Should we have objections to the concept, what be it? And I really don't think, like you said, articulated before, nobody objects to the concept. What we object to is the means to achieve it.
Mm.
That's saying, listen, we all want climate change, but we're not going to destroy all of our farmers in the process. Okay. And so, yeah, the fact that there's human beings on this planet that believe, and again, you and I both know clearly because we understand the four agreements. that type of logic, the importance of a narrative in the spoken word. Okay, I mean the spoken word literally is more powerful than any weapon.
Mm.
So they know that that's what we need to go after, is we need to curtail the ability to speak. And I'm just perplexed that what type of individual on this planet could actually believe that's a good idea. You
Well,
know?
those that have got an agenda and want us to only be believing and talking about the agendas that they want to promote. And when it comes to climate change, the climate's always changed throughout history. I mean,
Mhm.
here in the UK, as I understand it, in the Middle Ages, it was really warm. It was warm enough to grow grapevines. It was really warm during that time. So the climate has always changed. But what's being promoted now, obviously, is that this is just down to mankind and what we're doing, and we're ruining the planet. And as you said, on the surface, who in their right mind wouldn't want to look after the planet that we live on? Because without it, we're pretty stuffed, aren't we? So who
Yeah.
would argue with that? But but sort of saying that we're guilty, you, the man in the street, you're guilty for fucking up the planet, excuse my French. Um, and and also the climate changes, and that's been promoted as though that's really dangerous and we're all going to fry or something, but is it I don't know that it's going to be dangerous because it's a few degrees warmer for a couple of centuries. So I don't know that, but what's behind all of this is this 2030 net zero nonsense. And all that's about is about making money on the one hand, and I believe restricting our movement on the other hand. We've got to all drive electric cars, and who can afford that? Electric cars are an absolute fortune. That people are now getting very unenamored with them because they're not fit for purpose for all sorts of reasons that we could discuss. So, they want to restrict us. And even just a minute ago, I was talking about my log burner. You know, we're being crushed with our fuel prices to heat our homes here in the UK. So many people have resorted to having a log burner. But now the word is out that eventually they're going to say, oh no, you can't burn logs because of the smoke pollution. So you're never going to win. So, I just think it's another way of restricting our movements, restricting our connectedness to each other, and just ruining our lives, really, just controlling us.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And the using the environment is just one example. Okay, because they're using key terms. Like I've always been really um really suspicious of the term conspiracy theorist. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, because in my world, anybody who's curious or investigating, okay, is going to investigate down a certain path. And then as soon as they run into a roadblock called classified, they get turned away and they're relabeled as a conspiracy theorist.
That's right. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. If you
And
ask any question. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's like a derogatory term. Well, that's just you're
Mm.
just a conspiracy theorist. Well, I think the more accurate term would be corruption theorist. That's what I am. I have a theory that
Yes.
there's corruption. Okay, I don't believe it's conspiracy because I believe in compartmentalization, where you don't need a bunch of people to know to be able to pull it off. So forget the conspiracy thing. I'm a corruption theorist. Now, terms like hate speech.
Oh,
Okay,
gosh. Yeah.
have surfaced. All right. And that's a term that creates a scenario where it's indefensible.
Yeah.
Okay. And they use it. That is, I mean, who would possibly oppose the censorship of hate speech?
Hate speech. Yeah. Hmm.
Right. And so you can see with each of these things, there's sanctimony built in. They're creating a narrative that allows them to take the higher road sanctimonious wise. We're obviously
Yes.
not, we're morally inferior if we would want to not censor hate speech.
And then to back up your point, there doesn't really need to be a law about it, does there? Because the disapproval of your your community is enough, isn't it? You know, everybody frowning on you and saying, what? You don't support banning of hate speech, you know, so you're condemned by your community. You don't need a law, do you?
Couldn't agree more. That's a
Yeah.
100% accurate and astute observation. Is these things will police themselves.
Mm.
Okay. The example that was in the video was somebody saying, "Hey, listen, be proud of being white."
Yeah.
Okay. From my perspective, that guy needs a megaphone.
Yes.
Absolutely. And again, it's not because I agree with his ideals. I just totally agree with his ability to say it and then to suffer the consequences of such language. We don't want to. And two, one of the most important attributes of free speech, if I understand our Constitution correctly, was it protects the ability to lie. You have to have the ability to say what is not true. It's crucial, absolutely crucial. There's nothing, again, and if we're going to talk about deception and we introduce a little concept like George Orwell, which is basically global deception,
Yeah.
okay, it's a bit ironic that we're saying that we have disinformation when, truth be told, the whole program is disinformation.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, of course it is.
It's an Orwellian flip flop that
Yes.
those that are actually chasing down accurate truth are being labeled as being disinformed because of the global nature of disinformation.
Yeah.
And so, but the most important thing is it's freaking dangerous. I'm telling you, I don't break rules. I don't break rules, but I'm fearful that something like that will end me up in jail.
Well,
Okay.
easily, like even this conversation now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that just, again, if I elevate my perspective up higher to that of our UFOs and our Star Wars friends, I look down and I just say, who's behind this stuff? And the crazy part is, and this is where Amy would have been a nice contribution here, is we're pointing fingers at each other. They're successfully pointing the fingers at that guy, that white supremacist, said he's the problem, but he's not the problem. We're all just pawns in this equation. And again, I don't want to keep revisiting the same topics that we've done in other podcasts, but when all's said and done, it kind of goes back to that says, number one, who are these people that believe they can only further their agenda by silencing their opposition? Okay, if you look at, again, around the world, America's a little bit different, but not a whole lot different. I mean, Russia would beat. I mean, all they do is they take their adversaries and they put them in jail to silence them.
Yeah.
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 And, who are these people? Can we name them? Can we name the entities? I mean, like in America, from my perspective, it's always been the Democrat Party. They're just honest about the fact that, listen, we're all socialists, okay? That's what we believe. We believe that government should play a role in every aspect of our lives. They're close to honest about that. Republicans, on the other hand, preach a completely different message, but capitulate every single time. So it's all the narrative. But when all's said and done, the government continues to expand. They continue to encroach on freedoms. They can continue to bankrupt the country, and nothing ever changes.
Well, that's
It's
the
just,
point.
go ahead.
Whatever changes, no matter you know, it's so obvious that whoever we vote in, I mean, that idea that you can change things by voting in a different party or whatever is just so outdated now. And if anybody still believes that your voting rights will change anything, I mean, that's so ridiculous, isn't it? Because exactly what you just said, no matter who gets in, what actually changes?
Right.
Nothing at
They
all.
have they're incapacitated. They don't have the ability to make the changes. And honestly, it within the last, this last century here, the last 20, 30 years of this century, 20 years, I guess, witnessing what happened with Donald Trump is remarkable for anybody paying attention. Remarkable. I mean, the guy walked into office and he used the only executive power he had, which was executive orders, and he started writing all kinds of things. Basically, everything he did was to roll back regulations and put power back to the people. And that was not popular in Washington. Okay, so as we're in America, as we're heading for the election, uh, again, Donald Trump is ostracized by the Republican Party for the most part, but he's still winning all their primaries.
Mm,
So it's a crazy phenomenon. And what they've done successfully with Trump is make it all about his personality.
yeah.
Nobody, they say the guy's an asshole, and and he has fought like an asshole. Okay, but he's also got some people swinging back at him. But the crazy part is it's not about this individual named Donald Trump. It's about the ideals, and the support below that guy is something that's been around for centuries. Donald just happens to be their warrior.
Well, I think whoever it is, there's only one question you've got to ask, which is, are you a globalist? Are you a fan of the World Health Organization and the WEF? And if the answer is yes, then you're not a good guy. So, but, arguing about politics on that level, coming back to censorship, the kind of left, the woke is, I bet they're all rubbing their hands thinking that's it, everyone's going to have to agree with us now. But what people don't realize is eventually that censorship will affect all of us. It's to control all of us. Just because you're on the right side of the argument, or you believe you are right now, um, that you're still going to be subject to that censorship. And as
Absolutely.
soon as you're the one saying something that's not the mainstream narrative, then you will be subject to that, the same as you and I are right now.
Right, right. And but that number one, they're either oblivious to that point,
Yeah.
or number two, they don't care. But the fact of the matter is once the consequences of that take hold, they're going to blame anybody but themselves. You know, it's a
Yeah.
sanctimonious scenario that's saying, uh, we believe this is right. We don't care about the means. We don't care about the mess. But when all's said and done, we were still right. Somebody else had to have messed it up, that type of thing. But the yeah, so it's I don't the whole censorship concept. Are you familiar with Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
Okay, right. Uh, he's obviously a truth seeker and a freedom seeker, and people resent him because he doesn't tote the woke line. But he's really, I forget the name of the gentleman he interviewed, but the guy knew everything about the clandestine works of our social media and how they,
Mm.
what do you call it, shadow ban,
Yeah.
and the algorithms they use
Yeah.
to. And when you listen to something like that, you just wonder, is there a path for us to prevent it? I don't want to sound all defeatist, but geez, there's some powerful people that are truly behind the censorship movement. They'd like nothing better than, for example, my friend who was going to join us and myself, both of us have been kicked off Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got kicked off Facebook for a comment I made on the January 6th insurrection.
Yeah.
Didn't tote the line. So and it too is no questions asked. Your phone number, your email
Yeah.
address, you're just no longer welcome on this platform.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
got one of my pods pulled down. It wasn't even my pod. It was an interview that I'd done with a well-known journalist. And I believe that was taken down. There was nothing I said in it. There was absolutely nothing I could think that I'd said in that. It was about mental health. And I believe the only reason it was taken down was because of the journalist herself. Um, you know, uh, so yeah. But that's the thing, you get something taken off of YouTube and there's no explanation as to what part of your video it was or what you said. It's just that's it, taken down, no explanation, and then 3 strikes and you're out, aren't you?
Yep. Yep. Um, Now, too, let me ask you a little bit because I forget the name of the program that you're on from time to time where it's a bit controversial. Rise,
Yeah,
Sunrise.
this is what I was talking about. Rise, that
Okay.
was
Okay.
on one VSP. Yeah.
So what is the language? What are the semantics that you believe that YouTube would, because obviously you guys are out there spewing any hate speech.
No.
Okay. So what language do you believe? Is it just if it's anti-establishment, or what makes her controversial? What is the
Because she's known as a truth seeker. She's known, as a rebel. She's known as somebody that talks out against the system.
Okay.
Um, so and on the that's why really I just stay on that platform that I'm on, one VSP, and
One
it's a
VSP.
new and quite small. I mean that we're growing, but it's a small
Let's say that one more
platform.
time. ONEVSP, one VSP. It's a cool platform. Go look it out. You can find Lucinda's podcast on there as well, Talking Tea Leaves. One
Yes.
VSP.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I know when I'm on there, I can say anything, I can have any guests on, we can talk about anything. But there are very few of my podcasts sort of in and around the COVID times that I could put on YouTube, because of that reason. If you mentioned the word at that time, not so much now, but if you mentioned the word vaccine, or even if you mentioned COVID, the algorithms will find you, and then you're off.
Absolutely. Now that I think about it, I had one pulled down too
Yeah,
from YouTube because it was making reference to the vaccine and the COVID
yeah,
virus.
yeah.
And so,
And the ridiculous, sorry, Matt, but the
no,
ridiculous
please
thing
don't.
about it is that, you can be not on my computer, but you can be online, and all sorts of porn pop-ups are there. So, the real things that we need censorship for to stop kids seeing porn, that
Right.
that that still goes on, and that's not going to be stopped, is it? They're not going to be the
No,
people
no.
that they
And
go after.
you said a couple of things because again, where censorship might have some credence is when we start talking in terms of kids. Okay,
Yeah,
because again, the pedophilia, the underage, that is where censorship should end. And
yeah.
once it's a certain age, then any type, again, censorship becomes more dangerous when it's adults trying to silence other adults.
Yeah,
But
I
anybody
mean,
would agree with the protection of minors.
of course, and
Right,
not just sex and porn. I mean, it's violence, isn't it? It's all sorts of things that kids can have access to now. And
right.
once you've seen something, you can't unsee it. But when you really think about it, it astounds me. It's to think that one adult can say to another adult what information they can access is outrageous to me. How dare you decide what I can look at, what information I can read,
Couldn't
lest I
agree
come
more.
to the wrong decision.
Agreed. I can't fathom it. And so the fact that we both witnessed censorship regarding topics like the COVID virus and the January 6th insurrection here, and the fact that those are types of topics that they wanted to censor makes any thinking mind clearly understand what the purpose is behind this. It's not about protection of children. Why would they care if anybody hears somebody's opinion on the COVID virus?
Mm.
Okay. And why would anybody, if you have truth on your side, you are not afraid of any speculation.
Any question? No,
No,
really good
bring it
point.
on.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah,
And so the only time there's a need for censorship is if you are truly indeed hiding truth. And thus it's the deception that needs to be protected. And because again, if you and I can fall back on the truth, we could give a rat's ass who's speculating.
yes, yeah,
Yeah. So now let's take it a step further though, and the problem is continuing. It's not going to stop. And we have a sleeping world
yeah.
where it's just passing them by. And again, these people can be forgiven because there's no mandate on this planet that you're supposed to pay attention to this stuff. So the larger problem is, even though you and I and we can watch videos and we can witness it and we clearly understand the diabolical danger behind it, what do we do?
Well, I was thinking about this because I was thinking, okay, what will happen when we can't do this, when you and I can't talk like this, when people can't put up podcasts, when people can't share information? What will we do? and it will be back like in the days of the Depression, won't it? There will be speakeasies, there will be, and in a way, I think it will go full circle. And actually, will that be better? Because the only way we'll be able to have private conversations and share ideas is to get back together in person with each other and whisper the truth to each other.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, they've gone about keeping us separate and online like this, stopping us from socializing and being with each other. And in the end, as I said, it will go full circle, because what else will you do? You won't stop people thinking and wanting to share information and asking each other questions. It'll all just go underground.
Yeah, so it forces us to get back together. The good
Yeah,
old days. The
yeah.
one of the Bill of Rights, the right to assembly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think? What do you think will happen if this gets worse and worse and worse?
Well, I watched what happened. And again, in my world, what happens in America happens in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. It just seems like we're going to spearhead if it's going to. Um, and I just watched what happened in 2020, and they did everything they can to make sure that this guy who's not a team player would no longer be in power. And from my perspective, COVID was launched to destroy the economy. I mean, Trump
Yeah.
had reduced taxes and put all his money back into the private sector, and it was exploding. And obviously, that's detrimental to the status quo. Um, and to have to defeat him, I watched them censor him from certain platforms. They took him off Facebook, took him off Twitter, all these things before the election in hopes of defeating him. But most importantly, I believe COVID is a planned attack they've had forever that says, okay, for us to be able to succeed, we cannot let the people get together. We need to
Mhm.
isolate them and these types of things. So my fear is heading into November, because Trump ain't backing down. I mean, the guy's a warrior, man. He's either gonna win this thing, or he's gonna end up die trying. But I think they have no choice, because and so I think they're gonna pull the plug on the internet, or where we can't do
Yeah.
this anymore. And yes, that'll lead to what you just suggested, and that's us having to get together one by one. But if we don't have this means to communicate, it certainly it limits our ability to create strength in numbers, which is what it
Yes.
would take to form any type of resistance.
But then again, that I don't want to be negative, but that hasn't worked either, has it? I think we said this in one of the other podcasts, that when COVID was happening, those on the side of freedom and truth were saying, "Oh, don't worry, I only need 20% for things to tip," so on and so forth. And that just hasn't happened. There are now thousands and thousands more of us in the truth movement, as it were, than there was back then. And yet, I mean, just the fact that this bill can go through and be made into a law. I mean, if you look at it, you can no longer, anybody that still believes that we're living in a democracy, just to look at this piece of legislation proves that we're absolutely not.
We're not.
So
You're
so
right.
what difference are we making? There's more and more awake, and yet still, I don't know. I don't know. Who
No,
knows
no,
what the
correct,
solution is?
correct. And honestly, you said something the other day, because, like, again, me, I'm saying, listen, all we got to do is create the right narrative, and we can form this unity around that narrative. But you made a good observation that, wait a minute, there's a lot of organizations that have millions of people that have organized in this scenario. Whether it be like the American NRA or the whatever it might be, super huge organizations. So it must be where those organizations need to take the next step and conglomerate themselves or something, because you're right. So many people every day, more and more people become awake, but that hasn't changed anything. They're all still kind of handcuffed in terms of what we do next.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, and so I'm with you. It's crazy, because it just is a case where I think if you add, even though we're aware, and then you add the clandestine nature of those that wield the power and their ability to control the media, and the ability to win elections with very few, swing votes, those types of things, that the deck is just stacked so against us. Uh, yeah, it seems like it's going to take some sort of a revolution, because there's no way it's going to be done from within, correct?
No, and that's what we were saying, wasn't it, the other week, that it's no good trying to change these institutions. You need something different. And coming back to YouTube, my partner and I both came to the same conclusion very recently about YouTube. Is like we're just not going to watch much on it anymore, because I found myself, I tell myself it's because I'm always listening to something educational or something important, but I sat back and I thought, I am never without it. I'm having a shower, I'm listening to a podcast. I'm cooking the dinner, I'm listening to a podcast. And I got to the point where I thought, I'm just sick of this. I just want some peace and quiet. Why do I have to have this with me, this incessant voice? And I'm making it okay by saying to myself, well, I'm learning something. And whilst I want to know what's going on, of course I do, but you can check in once a week, can't you, as to what's on? And because I remember back in the day, YouTube back in the day prior to COVID, there would be loads of things on my feed that I would be interested in, loads and loads of suggestions, really interesting stuff. And now it's an absolute load of rubbish, like just mundane crap that's just all it is destroying your brain and clogging up the hours of your time with something that's just not beneficial for you. So for me, that's just one thing I'm going to do. Is I'm not going to fill up space by just having something on in the background. And when I've listened to one person putting an alternative view forward about climate change, for example, why do I need to listen to 10 people saying the same thing? I don't need to do that. It's not, I'm not learning, I'm not growing from that. So I don't know if I've gone off the point. I don't
No,
really
you
know.
haven't. You haven't. I
Yeah.
mean, again, there's a lot of rehashing. That's the part
Yeah.
that drives me bonkers too, is the narrative never changes. I mean, you've got in America here, the Republicans are blaming the Democrats, Democrats are blaming the Republicans, and that narrative never changes. They just keep switching different topics and pointing fingers at each other. But you're right, nothing ever really rises above it that turns out to be new concrete action. All right, Lucinda, that I think we got cut off mid-sentence there, but we're
Yeah.
back now. And so I would like to thank you for your time and tell you how much I love and appreciate you, my friend.
Ah, me too, my darling.
All right, so last thing, do you have anything fun planned for the weekend? The sun's peeking out a little bit. Um, any
Well, yeah, it's too wet to get out into the garden, which is a shame. So I've got to wait for the garden to dry out. But I'm a bit of a fan of DIY, and so I think I might do some of that this weekend.
All
Might
right,
get the
that's
old tools out, get the old drill out, get
there
the
you
hammer
go.
out.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
Yeah,
Heck yes.
well,
No, I would expect nothing less from you. You're not only brilliant psychotherapist, but get out the hammer, man. Let's start
I'm
making
mean with the
names.
old drill, mate. I
Oh,
am.
God. I absolutely love it. Well, beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, my darling. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.